Hey guys, coming for UnREAL Season 2, Episode 5, Infiltration. I was definitely looking forward to this episode. As usual, I've really been enjoying this entire season. But holy shit, this episode. I mean, this is a pretty big episode, really. There was a lot of stuff that happened here. And like I said, I think this is going to be another really controversial episode. And I will admit, for once, I actually do think maybe they went a bit too far, honestly. I do think that some of this stuff that happened in this episode was just a little bit too far, and I'm not usually like that. Not to say I didn't like this episode, because I really enjoyed this episode. In fact, I don't understand the hate the scene's been getting. Oh, they're offensive. Oh, things are getting darker. That's been the nature of the show. It doesn't surprise me that things are getting darker. It doesn't surprise me that things are getting more fucked up. I mean, I understand that. It's just some of the choices made in this episode, I don't really know if they need to happen in this episode. I get that we're halfway through the season and big things need to happen, which big things certainly did happen in this episode, but especially the thing that occurs at the end of this episode, don't really know if it need to happen in the way it did, which I'll get into. But let's just get in this episode because there is a lot to talk about. Not as much, actually probably a good amount of stuff, definitely. I will say this was probably my least favorite episode so far this season, but I still really enjoyed this episode. There was some really good stuff here, and even when UnREAL's bad, it's still really good. They do a really good job of that, but let's just get into it. We see in the beginning, Rachel and Coleman, they're arriving on set together in that, everlasting car, and Rachel feels really uncomfortable. She feels a bit too flashy, and that they're kind of just, basically just showcasing the relationship. They're not hiding anything, but Coleman tells her that she's the boss and she needs to own it, and that's how, he wants it to go, that she is his, he sees it as she's kind of his boss, because she's so strong, she can hold the show on her own, and Jeremy bitterly mocks her for it. Rachel gives right back after seeing Yael. We see Yael. She is very must-hair emerging from the truck, and you can tell right away these two definitely had sex, and not only that, but Yael also has a photo of the real Rachel with holes in it, and we are to assume that this was Jeremy that did this, and Jeremy's clearly over her, we can tell. Rachel reminds me get kicked out for this, and Jeremy reminds her that what she did with Adam, and Rachel kicks Yael out, and obviously she's really pissed about what's going on there. So Quinn's then trying on evening gowns for the Impact Awards, which is the big award ceremony in this episode. We see Chet enters, and we find it was, as we know, he went to jail, but he was bailed out by Jeremy, who's kind of like his right-hand man at this point, and tells Quinn that everything he said the previous night was true. She's the love of his life, and it's a night I kind of do feel bad for the guy in many ways, because Jeremy and Chet are going through very similar situations, but I think the big part of this episode is it's how they handle these situations, because I think a big part is that they're definitely trying to redeem Chet. You definitely see that. They're trying to redeem Chet. They're trying to show that he isn't a bad person, even though he's, kind of vile. He does things, he does go to extremes. I think Chet's kind of realizing this, and Quinn huffs and throws him out and says that he's embarrassing himself, and even says that, she wants to make connections and everything, and it'll be a great opportunity for her to mingle, make connections, and be a force in the industry. And, the reason she wants to get close to this one guy, John Booth, and the reason is because he's not Chet, and Coleman asks Rachel to be his date to the Impact Awards, and that basically sets the stage for this episode, in that we're gonna go with the Impact Awards, and we definitely focus on that a lot more than we do on Everlasting. That doesn't mean that Everlasting we don't focus on, because there is a great deal of stuff that happens on Everlasting. We see they're actually going to be filming an overnight date. We're only on episode 5, and they're doing overnight dates where viewers get to vote for 2 women to vie for the honor, and it's all a sham, of course. And Rachel then shows Coleman the picture that Jeremy has, and Coleman says that it's a fireable offense, and Rachel says that as much as she, can't stand Jeremy, she can't fire him because he's good at what he does, and that's exactly why they can't. And we've known this, Rachel said that to Jeremy in the beginning of the season, look, if you don't want to be here, why don't you just quit? And what did Jeremy say? Because he's good at his job, and yeah, he likes what he's doing. This is his work, and Rachel's not going to count him against that, because that's true. That's what he does. He's very good at what he does, and even though he can be very manipulative and definitely a dick, he definitely is good at what he does. And Coleman says he wants her in a ball gown at 6 tonight. Rachel says the Impact Awards are Quinn's thing, and Coleman says it could be theirs, and Rachel says it feels weird, and he says the rest of television will be there. Everyone, they're ever going to want to work with, and it's a great opportunity, they should take it, and basically, they shouldn't be afraid to take it. This is their show, and they shouldn't let Quinn steal their spotlight for once. So, on Everlasting, Graham then reads the results, which are none other than Yael and Dominique, which deeply offends Ruby. You can definitely tell. Ruby was really hoping that she'd be the one chosen, because we can tell, and we really do get more into Ruby in this episode, which I really liked. But Rachel knows that Quinn is the one behind behind this. She goes to her, asks why Dominique, and, you know, why Dominique. She knows why Yael, but why Dominique? And Quinn has this really devious plan. It's so Darius can get Yael, and if he made her own choice, she wouldn't get what she wants. And Rachel says that he wants Ruby, and Rachel asks why they're doing, you know, overnights before the, before the final two, and she says that she felt the show needed a little more spice, unless her and Coleman had a better idea for her. Madison then comes in, she demands her to find the Impact Award tickets, and Rachel then rather nastily informs Quinn that she and Coleman are going to the Impact Awards because he's the showrunner, and there's really nothing Quinn can do about that. You know, Coleman's the showrunner, that's how it's gonna work. Quinn has no say with that. So I thought that was I like Rachel's defense, definitely, because, yeah, I mean, there's really nothing she can do. I mean, Coleman's, you know, was promoted to showrunner. That's the position that Gary gave him, and Quinn can't really do anything about that. So, really, Rachel's not wrong here, that Coleman is definitely the showrunner. It's not to say that she's not, but definitely you can tell that, you know, Coleman's a lot more in charge right now than Quinn is, and Quinn obviously is definitely, not going to say scared, but she's threatened by that, definitely. You know, she doesn't want anyone else to take her place, as we know. So Coleman then goes to Jeremy, tells him that he got some feedback from the network about their look this year, and they have some concerns. Jeremy asks what they said, and Coleman says they used words like flat, undynamic, not evolving, but it was for no specific episode or scene, more of a global discussion. Says he's going to bring a visual consultant to course correct everything, demotes him to the insert unit, and Jeremy asks if this was Rachel's idea. Coleman says relation with Rachel is none of his business. Jeremy says maybe you should quit. Coleman says he always has that option, and yeah, that's true. I mean, again, that all goes back to that first conversation they had in the first episode, where Rachel says, why didn't you quit? Jeremy says he's good at his job. We can tell that Jeremy is just further and further down spiraling throughout this episode, and it definitely doesn't get any better from here, especially, you know, when we get to that last scene. But, you know, really, I think this shows that Jeremy is very slowly, you know, just not having any control anymore, and he has even less control than Quinn. He's always had less control than Quinn, but in this sense, he really can't do what he wants, and it's really starting to ruin everything for him. You know, definitely we can see that Coleman's trying to ruin him a little bit. So with last week, it's pretty much full war between Rachel and Quinn, and things are not much better in this episode. Things are probably actually worse in this episode. We see, basically, the overnight date selection is getting underway. Rachel whispers to Dominique to do something big to grab Darius' attention, obviously because she's going to try to not make things go Quinn's way, because when filming begins, Dominique spills the beans about Yael sleeping with a crew member, to Quinn's consternation, and Chet then finds, and obviously Quinn's really pissed about this, and Chet then finds Jeremy outside drinking. Jeremy says that Coleman demoted him, so he's filing a formal complaint, and Chet says that must be the protocol, and Jeremy says he's not going backwards, starting all over. It's been 5 years, and Chet says he thinks he knows a way to help both of them, and it doesn't involve the producers, and tells him to follow him. Now, I get where Chet's coming from here. The fact that, you know, Jeremy bailed him out, Chet's gonna help him, I understood that. But this does go in a very strange direction that I will get into. Darius then expresses his disappointment over what Yael did and decides not to choose either woman, which honestly I think was probably the right thing to do. I mean, the fact that Yael did all these things, that's enough of a reason not to choose her. But then you have Dominique, you know, she seems like, you know, she just narked on her, and no one really likes a narc. Also, I'm hearing this rumor that people think Yael's like this reporter or something, and I don't know if that's true. I think this episode kind of confirms that it's not, but it would be an interesting direction to take things in. But I've heard many people say that they think Yael could be like a reporter, and that's why she went to Jeremy. But basically, he instead asks Ruby to spend the night, and Jay's delighted since Ruby's his girl, and that's the one that he's wanted to win. And Quinn, meanwhile, is freaking out, tells Madison to get Rachel right now, but Coleman says to not worry about her, and tells them all to step inside. And I love this scene between Coleman and Quinn, one of my favorite scenes this episode. Quinn says that he must be the dum-dum that made it happen, and he says it was all Rachel, and it was a good idea too. He tells her to go home, take a couple days or a week since she suffered a loss, and she says if he was to meet her father, he wouldn't call it a loss. And Coleman says that he's talking about, you know, that's what she thinks he's talking about. She thinks he's talking about the funeral, but he's obviously talking about Rachel, who's outgrown her pretty much. And really, yeah, she has. I mean, think about it. Rachel is not at all intimidated by Quinn anymore. The fact that she won't even face her and tells her it happens and she'd have to know eventually, and tells her that she's doing all this just to mess with Rachel, and she should be the bigger person. And really, I get what, you know, he's saying, that really, she's not just, you know, trying to fix things. What she's doing is making things worse just to sabotage what Rachel wants. That's really all she's doing. And She's going to get her show back at the end of the season because he doesn't plan on staying. And she says he has big plans for the two of them and says if he wants to get rid of her so bad, why doesn't he just call the network and have them remove her? And asks if it's because he doesn't have the juice or the balls to do so. And she says featuring Ruby again by ratings which were crap unless he doesn't know how to read those emails, the ones with all the numbers on them. And Coleman says that 5-10 years from now, most people won't even know what a broadcast network is. They'll be watching everything online. And yeah, that's true. I mean, 99% of the TV shows I review for you guys, I don't watch live on TV. I review them on my computer, and, you know, I watch them on my computer, really. I think he's definitely got a point, especially with Netflix and things. I mean, not many people watch TV live anymore. Really, it's starting to not become as popular, and he really is right about that. So the only thing that matters is they can make some noise, and says he's doing the same thing she's done for 14 seasons, and it's just not noisy anymore. Really, it's not doing much of anything. They need to change it up somehow. And what Quinn wants, it's just, you know, this is like any show. As if a show keeps doing the same thing over and over again, doesn't change anything, it just gets tedious and boring. And I think that's really what Coleman's trying to say, that she's not changing things up, and this is really starting to ruin things. But Quinn then tells Madison to find her Wagerstein, and she wants Ruby's files in her hands 10 seconds ago and says she can make some noise, and you don't know what she has up her sleeve. You just know that it can't be good, and boy is it ever, you know, probably one of the worst things that Quinn could possibly do. I mean, everything she does is terrible, but this is probably one of the worst moves that Quinn has ever made. So Darius and Ruby go to the overnight suite. He disables the cameras, but we realize that but once he disables them, Quinn has had 4 other cameras installed on the sly, which is completely illegal, and she can't do it all. But of course, she's Quinn, so she feels she can do this. And as Ruby and Darius bond, she starts jumping on the bed. I kind of like the scene between these two. Darius asks, you know, what would she do since the cameras aren't on? And this is really Ruby's chance to see the real Darius. And basically, Jay sees the footage, and he's shocked that this is against the rules, but of course, Quinn made those rules and she can break them. Jay wants to narc on her, but Quinn asks him if he really wants to undo all the great work he's done in producing this show, and Jay shuts up. And at the Impact Awards, Coleman and Rachel then introduce themselves to John Booth, and I don't know how to feel about this guy. He's this media mogul who's brought a bunch of networks. He proclaims he's a huge fan of Everlasting, and he wants to know if Beth Ann will get to the end. I don't know, bringing in this other guy, I feel like it just makes things a bit too crowded. Look, I really like what they've done with Coleman. I think they've really just added a great central figure who's kind of like the mediator and kind of the one that, like I said, is the normal one who doesn't go to extreme measures. Well, he does, but he never just goes on them on his own. Like, Rachel's always the one to do that, and just as the two are insinuating themselves into his good graces, Quinn shows up, steals the spotlight. John's immediately taken in with her, says he's staying in a room full of legends, but she's the legend. And I get what he's saying, that she's the one that made the show, but obviously, you know, she stole their spotlights. And Rachel says that she can't believe that Quinn just showed up there, and Coleman says that they impressed John earlier, and to not undo all the good work, and she says she wants to stab Quinn in the eye with lobster forks. Coleman says doing something like that, and, you know, doing something like that would ruin it, and he tells her to relax and have a drink, and Quinn and John continue to flirt, and as Quinn flirts with John, Madison calls to let her know that the eagle has landed, and we don't know what she's talking about, but with a gleam in her eye, Quinn then invites John back to set to watch some fireworks go off in the woods, and I don't know about this guy. I don't like that he's really a love interest for Quinn. I don't think we need love interest for Quinn, especially after the whole Chet Quinn debacle. I think we've kind of shown that Quinn's main love is Everlasting. That's what she's in love with. She's in love with power. I think that's really what Quinn's in love with. She can't be in love with anyone. She's in love with power, and that's kind of how it works. And Chet and Jeremy are then having some kind of really weird therapy camp. Chet confesses to stealing his baby, that he still loves Quinn. Chet complains about getting fired, and Chet slaps him. He has to own his failings, not blame someone else. Jeremy finally admits that he loves Rachel, and the way that we go from this to what happens at the end, this is the part that just felt weird to me, because this really just, I knew it was getting somewhere, but I didn't think it'd go to the lengths that it did, which we'll get into. But meanwhile, in the overnight suite, Darius and Ruby are talking, they're sharing confidences, and he feels burdened by responsibility to his friends and family, and we remember that. Remember that he feels so bad for what's going on. She assures him that she'd still like him if he didn't play football anymore, and it seems that she knows everything that's going on, that she knows about his back, and they start to make out, and in the control room, Darius cannot contain his glee, calls Rachel, and says it's the black notebook. He crows, goes, but Rachel's alarmed that Quinn has put additional cameras in the room because obviously that's just messing everything up, and she knows that if Quinn did this, she's up to no good, and there definitely is something that's about to happen. Now, Jay is thinking that it's not going to happen because he's very naive, but she and Coleman then race back to set. They get there just as Ruby's father, Dr. Carter, arrives. At least it was her actual father and not some fake, mother that they hired, like what they do with Brandy. But basically, he is obviously very pissed at what happened with Ruby, and it seems like Ruby didn't even inform her parents, as we know. I mean, they kind of just took her away, and he thought that Ruby was at college all this time, and now he realizes that she wasn't, that she was actually on the show the whole time, and he's obviously really pissed about it. So he gets there very angry, and you kind of understand where he's coming through. He wants Ruby to have a good future, he wants her to go to college, and I think this scene really does show how Ruby's kind of evolving, and I really like that. Because he then sees what Ruby and Darius are doing. They're having sex, and he says that this is borderline pornography, and he decides to bust into the overnight suite, find his daughter having sex with Darius, and at first Rachel prevents the cameraman from filming, but Quinn then pokes at her and asks if she wants to make a boring show, or does she want to follow the story. And it does show that even though Rachel doesn't really, nothing phases her with Quinn anymore, she does still kind of listen to Quinn. That's just kind of how it is. She's listened to Quinn, for 7 years. She's going to continue to. Rachel wavers, and then takes the cameras in, starts producing. Ruby's father then expresses disappointment that she's on the show and that she's wasting her potential. He wants to take her home, but Ruby refuses. She's falling and says that she's actually falling in love with Darius, and her father says that he's ashamed of her, whispers before leaving. Ruby collapses into tears into Darius's arms, and it's a really sad scene. I honestly did really feel bad for Ruby here. No one should really have to go through something like that, and it's just really heartbreaking. I mean, she really was legitimately falling in love with Darius, and they fucked the whole thing up. Really, it's Quinn's fault, really, why this happened. So, in the control room, John then congratulates Quinn on the epic scene. He thought the show was scripted, and she replies that they don't make it up, they make it happen, and really, she's not wrong. I mean, they're the ones that make it happen. It's not at all, what they do is scripted, but the contestants' reactions is not scripted, and again, I don't know how to feel about this guy, really. He seems to be okay with what she's doing, and Quinn orders everyone to get ready for the elimination ceremony. Rachel then confronts her about the Ruby situation, and I like what she says here, because it's kind of true, because she says if she thinks Coleman is her ticket out of there, he's actually her Chet, and he's going to steal all of her ideas, take the credit. Rachel shakes her head that definitely is not going to happen, because Coleman is not at all like Chet, but she says that she and Coleman are partners, and in 3 years she'll have her own show and a man that loves her, but Quinn isn't buying it, mainly because we know that Quinn and Chet used to date. They used to date for a while, and then he left her for, Cynthia and everything, and that's why Quinn and Chet are the way they are now. So I think Quinn's really, kind of right here where she's saying, look, you're going to end up exactly like, me and Chet if you continue to do what you're doing with Coleman. And basically, before the ceremony, Darius and Ruby talk, and she apologizes for her father. He acknowledges that her dad was right about some things, and that he also says that it's not the first time that her father bursted in on them, and Ruby passionately... Now, I heard a lot of people say that why weren't they outraged by what happened? I feel like because of what they've seen, nothing really... outrages them anymore. I think Ruby expected, not necessarily expected, but she kind of just, kind of was like a reality check for her, and Ruby passionately argues that Darius could do more for the black community, and that he could be more than just a football player, because, yeah, he isn't really doing much for the black community. He should be doing a lot more, and he's not, and obviously, that's kind of pissing her off a little bit, that he's not really doing much. So at the and I can kind of understand where she's coming from there, but at the same time, Darius is not really into the black community like she is. He doesn't seem to care as much, and I think we definitely do see that here, and I did like seeing the way that was played out. So then we go to the ceremony. Yael grovels to be forgiven for her mistakes, and Darius keeps her, and instead, Dominique, who I honestly don't blame. I mean, Dominique was being kind of a bitch about this whole thing. She storms off angrily, and then in a surprise twist, he eliminates Ruby and tells Ruby that he doesn't feel that he's enough for her or her dad, and he's just not the man that she wants him to be. She wants a man that's going to fight for black rights. She wants a man that's going to be a huge political activist for this thing, and he's just not that man. And even though she's in love with him, he will never be that man, and he can't handle disappointing her every day. And honestly, I feel really bad for Ruby. I think they wrote a great character here, honestly, and I think this was really a good way to conclude her storyline. I think this is the end we've seen of Ruby. I don't know, I feel like we're gonna see her again. Something tells me we're going to. I mean, they did that with Brittany last season. I could kind of see them doing that with Ruby this season, but I don't really know. Ruby's in one of the worst positions because she's now in love with Darius, and she now has to leave. I felt really bad for her. Quinn and John then walk to his car, and he asks her to go home with him, but she has a grim task to complete, which we realize she has to buy her father's coffin for the funeral the next day, and they have this weird conversation about how they sell coffins at Costco and offers to take her there, and Quinn's, Chet's spying on all this from around the corner. I don't know what to feel about John right now. I honestly don't. I don't think this was the right direction to take this character in. I don't even know why we had to introduce him this season. I feel like he should have been introduced next season, or just hear about him, or maybe have a precursor to next season, but not introduce him until season 3. I feel like that would have made sense for them to do, but they didn't do that. Basically disappointed, he's very disappointed. Rachel and Coleman then walk to his car. He's very disappointed that Rachel followed Quinn's lead again. He decides to go home alone because Rachel decided to follow Quinn, and you can see that things go really badly. And then we get to the thing I know all you want me to talk about. As we know, Chet just, helped out Jeremy and everything, and what he did with Jeremy, how he coached Jeremy and basically told him to go after Rachel. Not quite in the way that Jeremy does, though, because Jeremy's still very drunk. He's spying on this from all in the trunk, and when Rachel goes to wardrobe to return her evening gown, he follows her there, calls her selfish and manipulative, and blames her for his demotion, and he's not wrong, I will say that, but when she tries to flee, Jeremy grabs her, hits her, knocks her down, he hits her, he knocks her down, and we see basically Chet appears out of nowhere, pushes Jeremy away, says he's fired, yells that that's not what a man does. He asks if Rachel's okay. She says she's fine, but she needs to change her clothes, and we can just tell in her eyes that she's clearly much more affected by what's going on, and that's basically how the episode ends. But here's my thing with this last scene. Look, I think it was a very well done scene. I think basically, Sherry Appleby and Craig Bierko, they really just acted the hell out of that scene. For me, personally, I feel that this was just a little unnecessary. I don't really think we needed this crazy shit going on. I don't think we needed all of this. I think it was just a little bit too much, honestly. I think there was a little bit too much going on. I'll get into that in a second. But for me, the direction they were taking Jeremy in, didn't it all seem like this was the direction to take his character in? I don't really know why they decided to do this. I mean, Jeremy's never really been a good guy necessarily, but I've never really seen him as someone that would do something like this. It just didn't really seem like that was the direction to take it in, and honestly, it felt like they just did it for shock value. I don't really see them doing it for any other reason besides shock value, and for me, that kind of lowered the impact of the scene a bit, and it didn't really work, I think, in the way they wanted it to. And that's pretty much how this episode ends, guys. Overall, what I think of this, I thought this was a really good episode. I definitely really enjoyed this episode. Like I said, probably my least favorite of the season. For me, there were a lot of really good things here, Quinn sabotaging Rachel's plans, yes, I really love that. Rachel still giving in to Quinn, yes, I really love that. But the big thing I think here is that they're really trying to redeem Chet. I think that's the big deal, is that they're trying to redeem Chet, and they're also, it looks like they're going to redeem Quinn and show that she is kind of still that surrogate motherly figure towards Rachel. We see next week that Rachel's going to be very damaged by what's going on by Jeremy, and I think this is going to be our chance to finally see Rachel wake up and kind of sympathize with her and kind of see what's going on, because a lot of people have said that Rachel has gone from an anti-hero to a straight-up villain, and it's kind of hard to see things her way. I think that's kind of the point. I think, honestly, I read an article once, actually not an article, I read a YouTube comment, and someone said that this show is about Rachel's addiction and how her depression, how the first season, she was grappling with it, but she was aware of it, and she was basically very keenly aware, actually, and she was basically trying to put an end to it. Season 2, she's kind of ignoring it, and it's just making things worse, and Season 3, I think is going to be her overcoming it, and I think this season is really her, this is going to be her wake-up call. This doesn't wake her up, I don't know what will, but next week's episode is directed by Sherry Appleby. Can't wait to see the way that goes down. But this really was crazy. I can't believe that Jeremy actually did this. I mean, really, it's mainly Chet's fault that all this happened, but it really does suck that this had to happen to Rachel, especially, after everything that happened, especially with Coleman leaving her and whatnot. Coleman and Rachel, do they have a future together? And is Quinn right that he could be the new Chet? I don't really know. I mean, in a way, I kind of see that. The way he bonds, the way he talks to Quinn is kind of like how Chet does. But he also gives Rachel credit. He does. He gives Rachel the credit she deserves. And unlike Chet, he doesn't just take the credit for everything. He gave Rachel that credit. But we know that Chet used to do the same thing. So is there a chance that he will turn into Chet? I don't know. We'll have to see how that goes down. I mean, Coleman says, I'm only staying here for this season, but is that really true? I'm not really sure. We'll have to see what happens with that. Darius and Ruby, I really do feel bad for them. I really thought that Ruby had a good chance, but unfortunately, she is now left, and I'm calling it now. I think it's going to be either Chantal or, Tiffany. They're going to be the winner of the show. I don't know which one, but I think it's going to come down to those two. Those are going to be the final two. I can definitely see that happening. Not enough focus in the contestants. I definitely will say, I think we do need to flesh out these contestants a bit more, because we don't know much more about them than their archetypes. We don't know more about Tiffany, rather than she's just a rich girl. We know a lot about Chantal in the sense of what happened to her husband, but I kind of want to see a little bit more going on there. And it looks like next week we're getting that. We're going to meet Beth Ann's family next week. That's going to be really interesting to see what happens there. I don't know how to feel about this John Booth guy. I really don't. I mean, I kind of like him and Quinn, but I just don't really know if we need to give Quinn a love interest. It just feels a bit out of place in this season, especially when so much is going on. I just don't really think we need that. But overall, guys, let me know what you guys thought of this episode. Love your thoughts on it. Really crazy stuff. I can't believe that the episode ended in the way it did. But Shiri Apley is directing next week, and I think next week is going to be our chance to really see her give an awesome performance, and probably an Emmy-worthy performance. I mean, she's such a great actress. That's really the thing that keeps me watching. Even though these characters are becoming a bit unsufferable, this show continues to be so great because of, Shiri Appleby and because of Constance Zimmer. They just killed in that scene. Josh Kelly was great in that scene. I just don't really know if that was the direction to take Jeremy in, and I do feel that some things they just went a bit too far with. Really there was a lot of shock value in this episode. But let me know what you guys saw this episode, after your thoughts on it. We'll see you guys. I definitely really did like this episode. Like I said, my least favorite episode of the season. Not as good as the past 4 episodes have been, but I still really did enjoy it overall. We are now halfway through the season. I'm definitely interested in seeing what's going to happen next week. Next week's episode looks amazing. Can't wait to see the way this all goes down, and if Rachel does, in fact, overcome what's going there, because I really hope this is going to be her wake-up call, which we know that Rachel's really damaged right now, so I can't imagine how much worse she's going to get, honestly. It's kind of scary to think about, really. The show's slowly going from a dark comedy to a straight-up thriller, and I'm kind of liking that. I'm kind of liking the direction they're going in, but I will see you guys in my next video, which will be, I think, for a movie review, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.